Hello, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Row Show. And we have a very special episode today. We're talking about the Olympic Games. And more importantly, we're going to talk about the racing that's coming up on Saturday. The draw just came out this afternoon. We talk a little bit about the course in Paris and just build a little bit of hype into this the racing coming up. Today, I'm joined by James Britton. James, welcome to the studio. Good to have you on.
Yeah, good to be back. Good to be back on the show. Looking forward to sitting around talking rowing, which is pretty much what we normally do.
Yes.
With a little beer.
With a little beer, not too bad. Lawrence is going to be flying off to Paris tomorrow, so that's why he is not in the studio today. He's a busy man, so he's going to be living the good life in Paris, and we're going to be holding the fort down. But I think to just get straight into it, James. So to start off with, we know the course it has the potential of getting a little bit rough out there. Juniors was there last year. I know the wind was unbelievably rough at juniors. We've seen some videos, but I also think there's this tendency for people to try to look for things that are controversial just because it's Olympic Games. In Rio we had the Zika virus, how dirty the water was, and there wasn't really anything wrong there. And obviously Japan had the COVID and no spectators. And I think sometimes, we mustn't fall into the trap of looking for problems that aren't there. But we know the course is rough, and there is a bit of a legacy of rough and bumpy courses at the Olympics.
I mean, the discussion point there is that this is an outdoor sport. You guys have said it lots of times. It's the best response to that. If you want it to be perfect, you can go and row on an ergo. That's the way I believe it is. As nice as it is to row on a pristine flat dam, we've all been there where it's race day, finals, time to race, and it's a pumping crosshead. You just think
Gee, strong opinions right out the gun. If you don't like it, get on the ergo.
And I mean, even down to the fact that at most world champs and overseas regattas I've been to, you always get washed down at some point. So what can you do?
What can you do? It is out of control. And again, it's a good point. Rowing is an outdoor sport, so I feel like in your preparation, in your planning, you need to sort of build adaptability and kind of like keep your expectations open to what's going to happen. But ultimately, I think, James, the best crews at the end of the day have the ability to get through these sort of conditions. I only really find it affects middle order and lower order crews, the rough water and the change in racing. Saying that, I'm starting to think of sort of examples of where that's not the case. But yeah.
Well, I mean, the obvious example is with Ollie at Tokyo. I think he was hot favorite going in, world champion in 2019 before. And Tuskos snaked everyone and won.
That's actually a good point there. So what I just said is trash.
No, but I think on the back of that, everyone sort of thought, it was just lucky, or not lucky, like he was just brilliant in the tailwind, Stefanos. But he actually was brilliant this whole cycle. He hasn't won, but he's lurking there. I think you guys controversially maybe have written him off a bit, but he's there.
He's there, certainly. I mean, it's like when we were talking about the single scullets, it's hard to, it's hard to predict too much when the results aren't there. Consistency is always the best thing when it comes to speculation. And on the draw, he is going to be. I don't even have him on the bloody draw. I couldn't.
You put him as 3 question marks.
Yeah, I put him as 3 question marks. I was actually.
Well, he's either against New Zealand, USA.
But we'll see how he goes. But typically in the single sculls, the progression is pretty easy, if we're being honest, at the Olympic Games.
Well, for the first bit.
I mean, really, and I feel like until you get to the semifinals, that's where you start seeing the top dogs starting to race each other. Maybe 1 or 2 quarterfinals, but the single sculls, you have like the top 9 from world champs, and then all the other entries come from your quota places from continental places. So I find in the sculls, you have like this big divide between the sort of top order and then the sort of bottom order. There aren't really that many middle pack scullers. I think in particular from Europe, because Europe is typically where you have the faster scullers, and there are only so many entries available. So I think the single sculls, that's why it lends itself towards the racing only starting to get super intense in the semi-final and the finals.
Yeah, I think that they've just got to whittle themselves down to the same size events as everyone else. Once you're into that top 12, it's Hunger Games.
Yeah, for sure. But just like you said, I think going back to the conversation about the rough water, um, I think Tuskos is a good example of crews that we often think about rough water and how it disrupts crews, but Tuskos is an example of an athlete that perhaps is at an advantage in the rough water. So maybe that's something that we're not discussing enough at the Paris Olympic Games. Is not we're talking about the water like it's going to disrupt the racing, but maybe the conversation we should be having is how is that going to advantage a lot of crews?
I think that the problem, as much as that is the case, the problem is we have so little to go on with that because you race so many times in the year in all these brilliant courses. Poznan, Bled, Lucerne.
Lucerne.
I mean, these are just wonderful places to row. And, the whole season is built around those sort of places. And then suddenly you've got the games every 4 years where it's not built around it. You guys have said this a couple of times on the show. But then how do you know who is really good in, choppy weather?
Yeah, but I was more so my take on the question, or my interpretation, would be not necessarily about racing, because if you take the percentage of racing in your whole sort of rowing throughout a season, it's like, time wise, like 1%, maybe even less than 1%. It's more about the crews where they're training at home and maybe more of their domestic rowing at home. I mean, let's face it, all of us, we have, bumpy water. Our local sort of home ground river plot can get a bit nasty from time to time, but if I'm being fair, it's actually pretty good most of the time. But what I'm trying to say is that a lot of crews will probably come from places that are exceptionally windy and are used to rowing on courses and training on courses that have super, like really bad weather, and are probably used to racing certain local races where things get really uncivilized. So again, it goes back to the question of maybe this is an opportunity for crews that excel in rough water, have that higher skill ceiling. Maybe this is an opportunity for those crews to come away with some medals. And it's interesting. Do you think it's unfair it's unfair, or do you think it's it's part of the sport? Like you said, I'm assuming you're gonna take that stance.
Well, I think that, every sport's got its variables. I think what's very interesting is that how tight the margins are at the moment, and we'll probably get into it now, but how, you guys have been discussing all week about who's, the top dog, you know, in almost every case, if someone is a percent off their best, they're out the medals or certainly not winning their race anymore. So it becomes so tight. So any small change, there were times I think where, a crew's going to win, maybe you used an example of the Kiwi pair. They're so far ahead that, rough weather or flat weather, there's not enough variables that are going to affect them winning. Whereas now, I think that that's not the case. Everyone is very tight. And, you're going to, any small change affects it.
Yeah, definitely so. I mean, also like maybe it's a good segue to start talking about the teams and stuff. But the Olympics has already whittled down so many crews from the international roster. You're only dealing with like the creme de la creme of world rowing. Most events sort of only have spots that are qualified through the world championships, and then an extra two from late qualifiers. So most events you really are dealing with the top crews, and when you get to the Olympics, you only have those top crews racing the heats. It's not like you're racing against other crews that are looking to develop, and younger crews, or under 23 crews that might not progress that well at like a world champs. At this stage, you're racing the best in the world. So again, like one of the points that we want to talk about tonight is how small the Olympic regatta is in terms of like participation, and I think it falls into what you were saying there about how small the margins are. but it is a very small regatta, and it's like I don't know how to feel about that because I do think it's on one hand it's cool to have a regatta where you just have the top dogs racing and it's like not that many not that much sort of progression, that many sort of quarterfinals and whatnot. You just have the big boys. But on the other hand, maybe would more participation make it a more interesting Olympics?
I don't think so necessarily. I think there's enough of that. No one wants to just watch one-sided racing, I believe. Um, I think that the biggest piece is how do you package that final those finals in the best way, because that's all this is about. As much as semifinals and heats are wonderful, it's all about how do you get down to that final race, everything on the line, 6 minutes, do or die.
I suppose one way to think about it is that the 3 years, usually 2 years this time around, but usually three, those years in preparation to the Olympics in a way are the heats and the rapid charges in the quarterfinals. Because the Olympics is such a big event once every 4 years. Why do we waste our time with unnecessary racing? Let's just leave the Olympics for finding out who the best of the best is. And in a way, these crews have been prepping for the last 2-3 years. So this is perhaps not the place to have a big participation event in a sport like rowing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the debate of whether the Olympics is about participation or whether it's about performance is a whole nother kettle of fish that we probably shouldn't go into. There's enough controversy on
Yeah,
the
there's so
show.
much controversy. Yeah, we
You
can open it
guys,
up,
you
and
and
I
Lawrence have already
yeah, I feel like
opened that can of worms.
we definitely opened a couple can of worms. But in terms of the participants that we're going to be going into, James,
I think,
uh,
sorry, just on that, the last piece is you guys always come at it from performance perspective. You rowing, you racing. So you always looking at it where I've come more from a spectator value. And I can tell you that from a spectator point of view, it's also better, I think, from the performance perspective, especially at the games.
yeah, it is a good point. I see we're opening the can of worms, but let's open it. I think there is, like, in terms of the Olympic spirit, and I think the wider conversation about the importance of sports and culture, participation is critically important. And you do have participation at the games. I think rowing is perhaps a sport where I think because of the number of entries and because of the bullshit politics involved, we have so little boats. So participation isn't something that really happens in rowing, and except for the single sculls. So single sculls is where the participation comes in.
Well, I think rowing gets the participation right in the fact that the men's and women's sports are equally consumable from a spectator point of view. There's no part of you can interchange between the women's events and the men's events, and there is no difference. It's a new crew, a new boat, and you just watch that. And I think that that's very commendable. I think that our participation issues are much lower down. They happen at school level here, at school level and university level. That's where the participation issues are in rowing. If you build that up, then the games becomes a different story. You can't use the Olympics as your platform to build representation when you're not getting it right at the grassroots.
Exactly. I think that's a very very educated way of looking at things, James. That's perhaps the golden policy when it comes to these things. But I think let's seal that can of worms for now. We don't. The objective of this episode is the hype train for the racing, and to go into the next thing. So James, what's been interesting in the last sort of year and a half is the amount of sort of dominant crews that have lost their unbeaten streak or they've shown cracks in their sort of performance and their form. And I often find that there are two ways of looking at this question, but I think it's quite interesting, but I don't think it's a surprise that it's happening towards the end of the games. I often find most nations don't have the resources and capabilities to sort of fund and develop um, crews and athletes at a full time capacity for a full 4 year cycle. So often I feel like there's a urgency and a impetus that comes towards the end of the Olympic cycle, particularly with crews and athletes are going through their first Olympic cycle. Maybe they started under 23 at the beginning of the cycle. Now they're racing at the Olympics. So I think that's part of the conversation. But What's your take on the recent sort of what's the fancy word I'm looking for? What do you make of the fact that there's so many dominant crews that have lost their streaks?
Well, I think it shows firstly how hard it is to actually build a streak and how hard it is to stay dominant. I think, and that any sort of long term winning streak, I mean, you've seen it, we've all seen how hard it is, even for where we've had really good crews, how hard it is for them to build any sort of performance over time with injuries, with finances, everything that goes along with it. And then the other question is, are we just throwing the baby out of the bathwater? Oh, one loss to Ollie, and it's big problem.
I so my thing. So we've got our notes on the TV for the listeners out there, and one of the first name that James put down on the bullet point of dominant crews showing cracks is Ollie Zeitler, and I must say I think that it's a little bit misfounded to examine Ollie Zeidler in that light, especially in the single skull. I don't know why, but I think it's just because of the person he is. But if you think about again another in my books, the best sculler of all time, Mahir Drysdale. Think of how many times he lost, especially working up to the Olympic Games.
No, I agree. Yeah.
So maybe, I don't think it's Ollie Zeidler is sort of lost his form. He's as fast as he's ever been. And he will be in my books, he will be the fastest at the Olympic Games coming up. So it's not a question of maybe him showing cracks in his game. I think his game is rock solid. But I think it's a question of someone like Simon van Dorp, who again is a recent entry into the men's single scull, that is finding his footing and is getting to the level that Ollie's at. So I don't think it's necessarily a question of Ollie showing his cracks. It's more of a question of other single scullers getting to his level. And when I mean other single scullers, I mean one single sculler, Simon van Dorp. And what's super interesting, James, is on the seeding for the Olympics, they put Ollie Zeidler second in the single sculls category. They actually seeded Simon van Dorp above him, which I thought was crap.
Big call. Big call.
Big call.
Look,
Bold call.
The seeding has always been a contentious issue. Yeah, I don't know. I have a huge amount of faith in Ollie Zeidler, and I think you write him off at your peril. But it is a very interesting case where suddenly, he looked unstoppable the whole year, and one Lucerne, and suddenly everyone's seeding him second.
Yeah.
Madness.
Seeding him second, I think that's madness. I don't know how whoever does the seeding, what went into their head when you think about the fact that you have a guy that's been world champion in 2022, 23, and 2019. He's the most experienced sculler. He's raced the most. He's got the most World Cup wins out of anyone. And by far, if you look on paper, he is the most sort of dominant sculler over the last cycle. And to seed him second, I think it's a bit of a. If I was Ollie Zeidler, I would see that and be like, I've got a fucking point to prove because no ways I just did what I did and I'm getting seeded second.
Well, for the past, 3 years, he's behaved like someone with a point to prove.
Yeah, definitely.
Anytime you see him, he looks like he means business.
And we spoke about this in our crew episodes. We spoke about the rivalry that Ollie has with Simon. And it's a natural rivalry on and off the water. It's so easy to compare the two of them. They're very similar physiological athletes, very close on the ergo at the fast. We're talking the fastest athletes in rowing in terms of like their ergo performances of all time. I should be saying row perfect. But anyway, we're talking about two of the fastest athletes we've ever had from a physiological point of view. They're similar size and stature, and now they're racing each other in the single sculls.
I think they're pretty good on the concept too as well.
No, make no mistake. They're probably excellent on the concept too.
But I mean, just in terms of the crews that we've got that have all sort of been in the same boat there, the Irish lightweight men's double, the British 8 and 4, the Romanian double.
Oh, the Romanian double.
And even Caroline Florin.
No, James, Caroline Florin. Now you're just looking for shit, dude. Now you're just trying to. Now you're just looking for.
Okay, we are talking about someone who's been winning for the last 3 years by like 3 lengths, 4 lengths. Suddenly, someone's got contact with her at Lucerne. It looks a little scary.
I don't know. I think Caroline Florin is the easiest gold medal of this whole regatta.
Oh.
Her and the lightweight British woman. Maybe the lightweight British women are up there with the favorites. But yeah, Cameron
No,
Foran. But going into the others though, the Romanian double, wild. What
well,
happened? And now
okay.
now Simona Reyes is not even racing in the double anymore. She's in the eight. So obviously that was a big thing that
Well,
rattled the things in the Romanian doubles camp.
I mean, I know we might be skipping around here, but that's a pretty good segue into Romanian selection policy.
Let's go
I think
straight in.
to me, it looks as if they've taken their crews, put them in a random number generator or even a blender, and just taken whatever comes out. Some examples for the listeners at home. Uh, the guys from the quad are in the double. The Tedosa from the double has moved to the four.
And Doses from the pair. He raced. He was in the pair in Tokyo that won silver.
So, okay, so he was in the pair, then the double. Now in the four. From the Arteni from the doubles moved to the pair. Chiruta has moved from the quad to the single. And then, of course, Simona Radis is a big call. There was a time, I think, where she was hopefully rowing the eight and the double, but that seems to have fallen through.
That's another big thing we must talk about is the fact that there's no doubling up on the Romanian side going into these Olympic Games. And how much of an impact is that going to have on their performance?
I mean, Jake, I think our team has always operated in that you must be proficient at sculling and sweep, and that you mustn't be too attached to one or the other. Other countries are a little bit different, but I've never seen people changing the year of the games, medal winning crews,
yeah,
consistently medal winning crews, changing them, within you know within 6 months of the games. It's this many on
yeah,
the
but
scale.
I think they're going to be fine. To be honest with you, I
Of
mean,
course, they're going to be fine. They must know what they're
the
doing.
fact that Cyprian Todosas moved from the double into the four, I think, is actually a bigger move than normal. I mean, he's an Olympic medalist in the pair,
Sure.
and he's moving from a boat that I would say, I know they won Europeans, but they they don't have an Olympic medal. They don't have that pedigree, whereas the four are Olympic silver medalists. So Cyprian moving back into the four, I think, is a sign of intention on the Romanian side. And if also when I look at the Romanian men's eight, that's they've got Marius Kosmiec, Sergiu Bijan, and some other notable names in there, which for me, from the outset, looks like they're going for the eight as their top boat.
I mean, I think that their team looks really good.
So good. And like again, another segue. We were talking about like the development of the Romanian team in general over the last three Olympic cycles and how much they've improved and how much their depth has grown. So for the listeners, to give you guys some context, in 2012, Romania had three boats at the Olympics: women's pair, women's eight, men's four, no medals. 2016, five entries, one bronze in the women's eight, and all the other boats were in B finals, no other A finals except for the bronze in the women's eight. 2021, nine entries, three medals: men's pair, men's four, women's pair. Women's double. And in 2024, we have 12 entries. The only events the Romanian team hasn't qualified in is the women's single scull and the lightweight men's double. And there are lots of potential medalists. So I don't know if it's Anton Colominici, who's the head of Romanian rowing at the moment, that's been behind this, but it has been insane to see the growth of the Romanian team.
Well, I think there's not too many crews where you would bet, where you would be confident that they're not going to win a medal.
I just find the dangerous thing with Romania, they're in the conversation of being able to win a medal, not like 100% their favorites are winning gold or their favorites are winning, definitely being on the podium. Most Romanian crews at these Olympics are going to have the ability to finish on the podium, but they also have just a strong ability to finish fourth or fifth.
I think the one other thing is that they, before that 2012, this to me looks like a massive dip for them more than an improvement. They
the legacy of the women,
their women's
Romanian
team, their women's team for a very long time had a huge legacy in this thing. If you look at their results over time, they've got, they dominate most of the women's events and have got good results in some of the men's events. So I'm sure that for them, they must have a very strong rowing culture, at least at a professional level. And I'm sure 2012 for them was a disaster to have three entries and no medals.
Yeah, definitely a big disaster. But there is there is this train that's behind the Romanian team, and linking it back to what you were talking about with the squad, because of this development, behind these entries, these record number of Olympic entries from Romania are athletes that are experienced. They've rowed for many years. They have confidence in their abilities, and that's why Romania has such a big team. And that's why when we look at the depth of the athletes available, and even though sort of switching crews around does seem a bit risky, and it is risky, in this case, with the amount of experience that they've shared across different boats, different combinations over the last 5 years, it's you probably find that these guys have rowed with each other many times before.
Now, of course, they know what they're doing behind the scenes. There's no question, and they looking at that prognostic sheet and thinking they've got good crews here.
100%. And the last thing I want to say about the Romanian team, James, if I had to think about the Romanian culture and the Romanian style of rowing, I would say for these guys, most of the crews here perhaps don't have the consistency that some of the GB and the Dutch crews have. But one thing that most Romanian crews have, if not all of them, I just feel like Romania as a rowing team have a killer instinct that other nations don't have. How many times have you seen Romanian crews sprinting for their lives to win races or to get through semifinals or to do one thing or the other? I just think they possess this intensity and this killer instinct that we often find lacking in a lot of crews. And sometimes I get the sense that crews are training so much. They're trying to build consistency. They're trying to build a aerobic base, and people forget about the racing element of, at the end of the day, you have to beat five other people to win. And I think Romania are the one team that always live to race. So I would say that they might not be consistent as GB in the Netherlands, but I would say they have the killer instinct that those two countries, well, not to say those two countries don't have it, but I would say they have the killer instinct along with perhaps the Italians.
I think from the fact that they haven't raced much this year, only Europeans, is not necessarily. I don't look at that as like a big strategic loss for them, and that they've made a big mistake. They obviously know what they're doing on that side. What I think it shows is that there isn't enough incentive to race, and that it's a shame that we weren't able to see them more this year. That's more the issue as I see it. That we want to see these crews row, and that it's a bad that they didn't race, not from their perspective, but from a spectator perspective.
Yeah, that is a good point. The sort of the incentivizing crews to race more, I think, is the real core of the issue here. You can't. I feel like rowing. I just when I compare it to, like, obviously in South Africa we love rugby. When I look at the fixture schedule for rugby, or a rugby team, and on a club and international level, they're playing games every single chance they get. And if you watch soccer or football, as most people do, you'll sort of have an understanding of how often they're playing every single weekend. Whereas on rowing, we have weeks between World Cup regattas, and most crews aren't even sending their boats there. Granted, it's an expensive thing to do, especially for continental crews that have to fly to Europe and stay there. But I still think the onus is on World Rowing and the larger uh, rowing structure in different countries to be pushing the athletes to race more often. And I don't know what there's no easy solution. I think the financial health of rowing is a big question in this too, because you need that to be able to sustain this sort of model. But again, I think we need something where we have 6 weeks of racing every single weekend for a World Cup at a World Cup level.
Look, I mean, we're a little off piece now, but the one piece of that is that necessarily World Rowing's responsibility to, they drive a lot and they create these wonderful events. Most other sports are built as around the club game. If you if you're
It's
honest,
true. It is, yeah, and the rowing is a sport where it's not
not
that
at
way.
all. So I think that's just food for thought, that our club structures, which are quite amateur in general, is where I think the opportunity is to grow. Because I don't look at rowing and think this is a boring sport.
No, of course not. I don't. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think that's the conversation. But again, I think it is a with sort of closing this sort of segue out here and getting back to the Olympics. I don't think this is a question around the fact that it's boring or whatnot. I think it's more of a case where I think as rowers, and as if I think about if you in the sport of managing and governing rowing, I think we need to have a completely different outlook to how we take care of our sport to try and progress it into the modern age and keep up with the TikToks and the YouTubers and the marketability of certain other sports in the world. But to get back onto the Olympics, James,
we'll do another episode on that one,
we'll
Jake.
do another episode. I think that's
We're doing this the whole week, aren't we?
we're doing it the whole week. So I think James, two other big teams I want to talk about are the two sort of strongest teams at the Olympic Games: the British, who have always been up there, and the Dutch. In my head, these are the two strongest teams going to the Olympics. They have boats in most events, and they are going to take away the larger share of the gold medals from this regatta.
So you and Lawrence have made your selections throughout the week, and some controversial selections. And you painted this as a very tight regatta where everyone's very close and where there could be a lot of variety in who wins. You can have Croatia here, you can have Switzerland here, there, Italy, USA. Now, let me paint another picture as maybe an alternative that is very possible to happen. We are sitting here, we could be sitting in 10 days' time discussing the greatest sweep program of all time, the greatest sculling program of all time in the British sweep program and the Dutch sculling program. Not to say that they don't have good sculling and sweep, but just think of this. In the men's pair, 4 and 8, they are arguably favorites.
100%.
In the women's 4, they are arguably favorites.
No doubt.
And in the women's 8, they have a decent shot at a gold medal. The only one where the British are under maybe going to struggle to get that gold medal is in the women's pair.
I mean,
just imagine if in a week's time we're talking about 5 gold medals to the British in the sweep event. And when you think about how close the games are, we've got one country so dominant. Do you think it's possible?
Yeah, I think it is possible. And you did mention before we got on the podcast here, we were having a discussion around this. You did mention that the British team almost did it in 2000. They won the 4, they won the 8, but if it wasn't for one notable French pair to throw that into whack, and probably the most famous race of all time. But
they were 700 meters. The British were 700 meters to go with clear water on their way to win all the treble on the men's side.
Yeah, to ruin Ed Code and Greg Searle's chances there of getting that historic gold. But to get back to that question, they have a very good chance. British have a very good chance of getting gold in the pair, the 4 and the 8. And if they get that, that will be one of the most legendary things that have ever happened. But I think there's a stronger chance in the Dutch. I think there's a stronger chance the Dutch win all the sculling events on the men's side than on the men's side than the British do on the men's sweep side. I think the two biggest sort of question marks are, well, 3 now. Obviously, the Dutch men's sculler, Simon van Dorp, is going to have to have
I heard you just say there's a good chance that he beats Ollie.
I mean, there's a chance, but he's going to have a fantastic regatta to do that.
So you reckon there's a better chance that he beats Ollie than Ollie win Griffith and Tom George win the pair?
No, I think
the controversy
Ollie,
here, ladies and gentlemen.
No, Tom and Ollie have a much higher chance of winning the pair.
Spend too much time with Lawrence.
You see, Lawrence, we need a 3-way. We need Lawrence on the cows right there to add to this mix. But no, the Tom and Ollie have a good chance of winning in the pair. I think even though that event for me is the gladiator event, I think they do have a good chance of winning. And Simon, I think Simon's beaten Ollie at Lucerne, so he's proven the fact that he can do it. He did it at the most recent race that they raced each other. So he has a chance of winning gold. But on the sweep side, Tom and Ollie have a greater chance of winning. However, the men's 4 has now also been thrown into this mix, and I think they they are favorites to win the four, but it's gonna be
Jeez,
it's gonna be
that's I
close.
don't know. That's a tough one because they've what? So four crews have beaten them. I think
Three crews have beaten
three
them,
crews have beaten
and
them.
like I do think with their record, I think you can't not call them the favorites on paper if you look at their record.
Yes.
But
One
on
bad race
form,
doesn't mean you're
well, they've had more than one bad race. But anyway, on form, then aren't the favorites going in. They were European champions, but they've been beaten by Italy, been beaten by the USA, and
yes.
they've been beaten by New Zealand. Three different crews.
The way I look at it for that British sweep team on their best day, I don't think anyone's touching them. Any of those three crews. They are rowing, when they hit that rhythm, they're rowing 2 pips below everyone else. They're doing a meter per stroke further per stroke. I said per stroke twice. That's where they are just killer.
Yeah.
If they get rattled, they don't look the same.
Yeah, and I must say, on Ollie's best day, no one's touching him. So
100%.
Simon's gonna have to have the performance of his life, and I think Ollie's gonna have to make a mistake for Simon to win.
But that is all there is in this: is one mistake and one
Yeah.
brilliant race. And
But so going back to the bigger picture here, so the Dutch and the British have really strong crews there. I think the Dutch have a better chance of finishing this regatta at the top of the medal table than the British do. I mean, let's get into it. Obviously,
yeah,
they're stronger on the sculling side, so let's start there. Double, it's a no-brainer. Quad,
well,
it's a
if
no-brainer.
you ask, they have got three of the most of my four most confident gold medals that if I put my money on,
Pair, double, quad.
well, double,
Oh,
no, Caroline Florin,
yes,
men's double,
yes.
men's quad, and the fourth one being Imogen and Emily
You talk
from
about the
the
Dutch.
British.
No,
So I'm saying three
oh,
of the
the three of
four.
the
If I'm
dominant
going
are
to
all
put my
Dutch.
money
Yes.
on who's going to win a gold medal, those are my four that I think are really tough to beat.
Yeah. So the way I see it, so on the women's side, you have Carolyn Florin, who is, you know, unbeaten and a no-brainer to win the gold medal, despite what you say. Um, and you have the women's quad, who's got a good chance of winning. Maybe not has got a good chance of winning the gold, but a very good chance of finishing on the medal podium. Women's pair, who are going in as favorites to win the gold. And certainly in my head, there's no situation where they don't finish on the medal podium. Then you have the um, on the women's side, who else? Women's double, not they don't have anyone. Women's four, they don't have
Women's
anyone.
pair.
Women's pair, I've spoken about them. And then on the men's side, you have the single sculler, the double, the quad, and on the men's side, you have the eight, who's got a good chance of medaling, and I'd say maybe they fall, but I don't think so. So that's 7 very easy medals. For the British, you have lightweight women's double, men's pair, men's four, men's eight, men's quad, that's 6,
Women's eight.
women's eight, 7, women's quad, 8. So yeah,
That's
actually
medals.
that's medals.
Medals. But the Olympics measures golds first.
Golds first. So I think the Dutch do have a good chance of coming out on top. And
But you never
also,
know. Croatia might be top of the gold medal table.
but I think the thing, yeah, no, there's no chance they were coming on top of the medal table. But anyway, why are you saying these random things now? Anyway, what I want to get back to is that I think the Dutch. The reason I'm giving it to the Dutch is that they are they are stronger in the events that they have crews in. The British, besides the lightweight women's double and the men's eight, don't really have any crew that's a no-brainer for a gold medal. Whereas on the Dutch side, you have the women's sculler, the men's double, and the men's quad. So yeah, and the
Yeah.
women's pair. I would even put the women's pair in there.
Well, yeah. No, look, I mean, there's no question. They're a classy outfit. And I think that those three crews are going to be extremely difficult to beat.
Yeah, and then so James, we've spoken about the big teams. Maybe let's give some light to the smaller teams that catching up on radar. And I think the easiest team to talk about a bit is the Irish team. You know, they had one crew in London. Sanita was their sole representative in London. And 12 years later, they have multiple crews entered and multiple chances of winning medals. I'd say primarily their hopes are resting on their men's double, their lightweight men's double, and even their women's pair on maybe finishing in that bronze spot. So Ireland is a smaller team that's grown significantly in the last couple of years, and perhaps has a larger, even though it's a small team, I think they have a big presence in the rowing world.
No, really incredible uptake from them in the last 8 years. And I think even their women's four outside shots at a medal as well.
Bold.
Well,
Well,
let's
I
see.
mean,
They've been there and done it,
they've
you
been
know?
there and done that. They've got an experienced crew, so and they're in an event that has so many, there's so many strong crews. So, like in an event like the women's four, I think it suits a crew that might not have been super consistent, but has got the pedigree. So that is true. They do have a strong shot there. So small teams, Ireland are definitely there. Big shout out to South Africa. Definitely time. It's the time of the episode to make our bias known, and we have a good chance of medaling in the men's pair. Big shout out to John Smith and Chris Baxter, who are going to be representing us, and also massive shout out to Paige Bondenhorst, who's at her first Olympic Games in the women's single scull.
Tough place to be in the single, but I think at least John and Chris really looking insanely good. Every piece of video I see, they look
Yeah, they're
amazing.
really
So
good, and we are definitely on paper they don't have the track record that some of the other pairs have, but they do have in my head they have got the X factor, they have the pedigree. John's Olympic medalist from London. He's been a stalwart of the South African men's team at the driving the team on for the last 4 Olympic cycles. Chris Baxter, you know, maybe one of the hardest under 23 athletes we've had come through the system. Under 23 record holder in a 619 in the men's pair under 23 level. I mean, I think that might put him in one of the top 50 times rowed in the men's pair ever at a under 23 level. So if you've got two guys to sort of make magic happen at the Olympic level, these are the two guys to do it. And they showed that they have the speed at Lucerne. I know they just finished off the podium, but if you looked at how close they were to the Swiss, the Spanish, and the British, who are in my head the three top dogs in the men's pair, they got a really good chance there of finishing in the medals.
absolutely, I think they've got as good a chance as you ever will get, and they're looking quick. They're looking sharp. They've got the BMT that they need. They've both performed at the highest level. John, obviously, more than anyone else, at least in South
Yeah,
Africa.
he's going for his fourth Olympic Games. He's qualified 5 boats
He's
for
won
4 Olympics.
world champs, won the Olympics, won.
Used to hold the record in the lightweight
Yeah,
men's double until the Irish
yeah.
took it. Maybe he should have pulled it a little bit harder. Him and
You could,
James.
yeah.
I'll go
We'll
take
tell
James.
James
I'll
that,
tell
yeah.
James Thompson. What was he thinking?
No, but I think that's I think that they're undercover on paper just because they haven't performed at as many regattas. But if you really look at it, they should be right there. Fourth at Lucerne, and fourth is as much as it sucks to come fourth at Lucerne before the Olympics. If there's anything to drive you on,
I think
you can do it.
that fourth. I think that fourth place is probably one of the best things that could have happened to them going into the Olympic Games. You don't want complacency going into the Olympic Games. You don't want a false sense of security, especially in the men's pair. That result is just probably giving them more belief than they had before.
Exactly. It's all about the belief in that last 2 months, I think.
And they might not have finished on the medals, but if you look at their speeds and if you start looking into the data, they've got it. At the end of the day, oftentimes you have crews that they might want to win a medal, but they've never had data to prove that they can do so. But in this case, they have the data to back up what they're able to do. But I think to finish off a South African segment of the hype train, to the listeners out there, all our South Africans, any neutral, or South African adjacent fans, we have the men's pair and the women's single. Paige, the strongest South African woman that we've ever sent to the Olympics on the ergo. So I could be lying there. Actually, no, that's a lie. But anyway, one of the
Big call.
strongest. Big call, big call. But she's definitely one of the strongest. And what she's done the last couple of years, I feel lucky to be able to be part of it of a team where someone that's sort of grown so much the last couple of years. So keep an eye out for them. Definitely worth your while, sort of following their progress. Now to move on to I think our last point of the show, we have the draw for the Olympics. It was announced today, and we're going to just go through the draw. It's here on our TV to give you guys a bit of an idea of what's happening here. We've got the draw on the TV. We're going to give you a hot take on what's happening. The 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 boats that have the spiciest draws are the pairs, and the fours, the 2-man boats and the 4-man boats because of their entries. So to start off with, the pairs and the doubles, you have what's the total entries there? 13.
13.
Thanks, James. My maths is terrible. 13 entries. Top 3 go through the heats into the final, and then the rest go through to the repechage. So in the men's pair, I think the big thing that's standing out to me is heat 1. You have Spain, Ireland, Switzerland, USA, New Zealand. That is quite a spicy heat there. You have world champions, the Swiss that are in there. You have the Spanish in there. The conversation for me is going to be around who gets through between Ireland, USA, and New Zealand, who I think are operating at a very similar level at the moment.
No, that's going to be tight. And I think the other thing is, over a shorter regatta like the World Cups, it's much more important to get through this. But I think going through a rep when your racing is over so many days, do you think that makes a big difference?
Um,
I know it makes a difference because you're slower,
yeah,
but
it's
does the extra race really have such a big factor?
not if there's a break between racing. I don't think it has a big factor. And in fact, I would say in a lot of cases with crews that are young or crews that haven't raced much, it's probably a boon. I mean, let's face it, no one is going into a heat aiming to go through the rep. But I think for a lot of crews here, if they do go through the rep charge, I think it's definitely going to be a good thing because in a way, it's another chance to prepare for the final. And, it happened in the men and women's 8 in Tokyo. Both those boats went through the repechage to get to the final, and they won the final. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that the repechage, that extra race, perhaps gave them the edge in the final, especially in a year where there was not much racing because of COVID. So if you take that and you apply it to these sort of events, I think for younger crews, I think it can be a massive boon to actually go through the repechage. And then two shout outs are our boys, South Africa, racing in Heat 3. They're up against Germany, the British, and Australia. That's an easy race for them. Hey, James.
There are no easy races, Jack.
Well, I can say that. I don't have to. They
Yeah,
can't
we
say
can
that.
say it
I
for
can
them.
say
Yeah,
that.
yeah, no. I am confident that they'll get through.
Moving on, we have the men's double, which has some spicy entries. Obviously, this is an event that has an insane amount of depth. Um, and I think off the bat again, Heat 1, super spicy. The home favorites, the Netherlands, are in there, and it's actually this boat has a lot of sort of crews that are in form this year. So USA gone through leg qualifiers. They had a cracker World Cup last year. New Zealand with Robbie and Jordan Perry. Obviously, Robbie needs no introduction there. They've been on top form this season, winning, I think, the last World Cup. China, who are Olympic medalists, and Serbia, who I think are the biggest underdogs this whole thing. And I think people might think they can write off Serbia, but I think Serbia perhaps have a stronger chance of going through this heat than the USA and New Zealand.
I think that you're absolutely right, but the heats I'm actually looking at is Heat 3. And that's because you've got the Spanish, the French, and the Irish, all of whom I think will be there and thereabouts for that bronze medal. I think we've seen what France can do at the last Olympics. We've seen what the Irish can do at World Champs before, and the Spanish have shown over and over again that they can perform.
Yeah.
Tough one for Germany to draw that one.
Yeah, it is tough, but I don't think writing Germany off that early might be a bit of a risk because I think France hasn't been in the best form. So there's a good chance that France, who are the Olympic champions and the home favorites, could go through the rep here. Spain and Ireland are probably the second most consistent crews on this roster besides the Dutch. So I think they're very strong candidates to go through. And then Heat 2, you have Croatia, Norway, Italy, and Romania. And I hate to say it, but for me, it's an easy choice that I think Croatia is probably going to be going through the rep there.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I'm quite excited to see that Norwegian crew.
And then the women's double, I wrote there it's women's pair, but that's not the women's pair; it's a women's double. So just to keep it clear for everyone, and especially
They
James.
can't see this. Don't worry.
I know. I'm just trying to give them context. I'm trying to give them contents. Women's double. This is an event that's opened up very recently. We have 13 entries, and I think we have a lot of crews that have the capacity of medalling. Romania are in Heat 3 alongside Norway, who's come out on top against them in
Wild.
China. I don't think there's any chance they're racing the Czechs. I think the Czechs are going to be looking for a big race to get through in that crowd. Heat 1 again. It's these heats that have got 5 crews in them that I think are probably the most spicy. You have the Brits, the USA, Italy, New Zealand, and the Dutch. I think the women's crew I think has got a good chance of going through there, USA, and I think it's going to be a really tight race between New Zealand, Italy, and GB to get the last spot there. Any words of wisdom there, James?
Not too much I'm going to add on this one. Sorry, Jake.
Not too much. Lightweight women's double. I don't think there's too much to sort of go into, except for the fact that this is a bow class that goes through to the semifinals. Nothing really spicy with the seeding. I think there are enough crews that the crews that are favorites, and when I say favorites, GB's going to go through easily, and I think all the other big names are definitely going through there. So don't want to get stuck there for too long. We have 3 heats. Top 2 go through to the semifinals. The rest have to go through the rep charges. But this, James, you have to ask me if you want to go through a rep. In this situation, I'd say there's no situation where you want to actually go through the rep. I don't think this is going to help for a young crew or whoever if you in an event like this going through the rep.
Absolutely not. I think that one, the only piece is that it's mind blowing that used to be the gladiator event, as you guys always called it, and now you're just saying, oh well, the GB is going to win. How amazing that someone's able to stamp their authority on an event like that.
Yeah, I know. It actually goes to show that how good the British lightweight women's double. And James is going to say something big here.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen.
If Imogen and Emily of the British lightweight women's double competed in the women's double, they would be favorites to win gold medal. They've rode the fastest time this whole cycle of any women's double, irrespective of class. Not a single heavyweight women's doubles rode a faster time than they have. The 6:40 record that they broke.
We need Matthew Griffiths to help us out here.
They're less than 3 seconds closer. They're less than 3 seconds away from the fastest heavyweight women's double of all time. They are the greatest lightweight women's double of all time, James. That's what I'm trying to say.
I just can't believe what you said, that they might be the actual favorites.
I do think they're the favorites. I think if they had to race both of these events, they would be favorites to win the gold medal.
How would that be for a double up?
That would be excellent. I don't know why they're not doing it. Well, I don't think it's possible with the racing schedule, but they certainly do have the capacity of doing that. Moving on to the men's lightweight men's double. Actually, there is a spicy heat in this case. I think Heat 1. Bear in mind, it's top 2 to go through. You have France, Argentina, Spain, Switzerland, Japan, and Mexico. Low key, Mexico have been really good. They've had a couple races where they've been on really good form. They qualified through World Champs last year. France had to go through the late qualifiers. So I think we have a good opportunity here to see sort of France and Mexico go toe-to-toe to take that last spot. There might be a case again where we see a French crew going through as home favorites, going through to the repechage to get to the semifinals. So I think quite a big obstacle for the lightweight French crew to get through this heat.
Yeah, I think between Switzerland and Mexico, you've probably got 2 really strong crews there.
Yes, definitely. All right. Moving on to the 4-man boats, and we're going to get on to my favorite, the men's 4, which probably has the most crazy thing.
Yes.
But to start off with, we have the women's 4, two heats. Top 2 go through to the final. the rest of the crews go through to repecharge. It's not the worst progression, but I think you definitely want to be getting your ticket through to the final, especially in a case of unpredictability. Maybe that's one thing we should have brought up. The easiest way to make the job the most certain is to go straight to the final and not risk fucking getting, excuse the swearing there, risk moving a day of racing and for that to mess things up. But looking at it here, the first heat: USA, GB, Denmark, New Zealand, and China. I think you have the USA and GB going through there. New Zealand is going to have a sort of humdinger to get through. Actually, no, I take that back. USA have put their top dogs into the women's eight, so I think you're going to have a really good race between the USA and New Zealand for that last spot. GB are going to sort of win that heat. What do you think?
I think Denmark as well, outside dark horses. I think Fee would be Ericsson's in that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, she is in that. No, no, no. She's in the pair. She's in the
The
pair.
pair.
This
You
four
can
went
edit this
through.
bit out, right?
No, you can't edit this out. The mistakes are known for all. But actually, talking about small teams, I just want to shout out to the Danish women's rowing team for qualifying the eight, the women's four, and the women's pair. Hey,
Wild.
women's eight and the women's four went through late qualifier. So I think massive shout out to the for
No, no.
Denmark and for in general, actually the whole of Scandinavian women's rowing is actually doing really well because the Norwegian scull is also representing. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here.
I think if I look at the four person events, they're missing those few extra qualifying spots.
There
The
are this is
nine top crews. So maybe this does answer your question a little bit earlier. Nine crews doesn't give enough. Everyone's going straight to the finals, not necessarily.
yeah.
We're fucking this up badly.
No, we're not fucking this up. The last Olympics you had 11 crews, so
11 crews,
we've lost
and
two
before that,
crews.
13.
13.
So we've
When
gone
we
from
raced in Rio,
13.
there were 13 crews.
Yeah.
We had 13 crews there. So we've lost 4 crews in 2 Olympic cycles, which I think does have an effect on the racing here. We had to go through a semi-final in Rio. This time around, straight to the final. So I think in this
Yeah.
case, we are missing the 4-man boats. We are missing at least 2 crews.
Those
I think
extra
11,
seats, yeah.
13 crews is a much healthier number for an event like this.
And I think it just adds an extra dimension because of the pressure of the semi-final.
Yeah, the semi-final, yeah, certainly so. It's definitely another element of pressure. Heat 2 in the women's 4: Ireland, Romania, Australia, Netherlands. This again actually is quite a humdinger here too, because all these crews have got very strong crews. The Dutch women's 4 silver medalists, Australians Olympic champions, Romania is coming up in a big way, Ireland bronze medalists. So you have all the Olympic medalists from Tokyo racing each other in the Heat 2 of the women's 4.
Wild.
Wild. Very, very big. Who would you say out of those 4 crews can go through, James?
I don't know. I think that I don't know enough about the Romanians, I suppose, because of all the things we've discussed already, but it's hard to imagine that they're going to struggle so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Ireland going to have a cracker of a race to go through there. But moving on, I think perhaps the event with the spiciest seats at these Olympic Games is the men's 4. To get right into it, the spiciest thing about this is that the Italian 4 wasn't seeded for these Olympics. They had New Zealand, GB, USA, and Australia seeded. Italy missed out on seeding, which is crazy. And as we predicted, it has led to the heat of death. Heat 1 of the men's 4. Every single crew is world medalists in the last 2 years, except for Italy. But if you count Italy, Italy have medaled at the last 2 Olympic Games in the men's 4. So you
And
have
this year in the World Cups.
in the World Cups. You have the Dutch, who are medalists from 2022 World Champs. New Zealand, medalists from last year. GB, World Champions 2 years in a row. Infamously didn't finish on the medal podium for the first time in a while at the Tokyo Games. Italy, who haven't sort of been on form, but it's a very experienced combination, and they are Olympic bronze medalists from Rio and Tokyo, and Pepe and Pepe Vincino Giuseppe and Matteo Lotto. They have a very special combination. And Romania, Olympic silver medalists, and they finished on the podium in 2022. And Romanian selection has switched things up here. So this, for me, is the heat of death. You have GB racing two crews that beaten them this season. So there's a chance that GB goes through the rep.
No, it is mind blowing. I think that that Italian crew is undercover, extremely dangerous. What you've also got to remember is that for the last probably 12 years, Italy have had a crop of athletes who have really performed well, performed consistently, and performed on the biggest stage, winning a lot of Olympic medals. And now I think you're getting to, I don't want to say the twilight era, but the last of those athletes now in this fall.
Yes, we are. This is the end of the generation.
I mean, I'm not saying that they're going to retire next year, but you're not seeing the Italian presence throughout the event like you were 6 to 8 years ago. And this crew can box with the best of them. We've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have. If we're talking about that last generation, a lot of them are already retired. I'm thinking Marco Di Constanzo, Matteo Castaldo, Bruno Rossetti, who are all Olympians last time around. They've all sort of uh, retired, and then you have Giuseppe Vincino and Matteo Lotto, who struggle with injury. They've had. I don't think they might not necessarily retire because they still are relatively young. I think they're around 30, 31, so they definitely have another Olympic cycle going through. But they have struggled with injury a lot in the past, and I think this is why we're only seeing them turning up this year in a big way. But a team like Italy, they have the depth, and I think a good example is Nicholas Cole, who is the strokeman of the Italian boat coming from the USA. He's managed to fit in really well. So I think they have the depth to do it, but you definitely see a generation of Olympic medalist Italian rowers that are sort of at the end of their at the end of their life cycle as rowers. So can they send it off with a gold medal?
The way I see it, they've got as good a chance as anyone on this list.
Yeah, I agree with you there, James. So out of those five crews, Netherlands, New Zealand, GB, Italy, and Romania, who's going through top two in the men's four, heat one?
No, you must think that Lawrence is saying making such controversial statements. It's so hard to pick. I think you're going to struggle. Romania and Netherlands, I think, are going to really struggle, and possibly New Zealand. I think the British and the Italians are.
New Zealand!
The,
Woo! Yes, let's
I,
go.
I think the British and the Italians are favorites for the gold medal. That's.
I think, James, in heat one, GB, Italy going through, New Zealand, Netherlands, Romania missing out. Second heat of the men's four, which is noticeably weaker. Australia, France, Switzerland, and USA. You have the Swiss who went through late qualifiers. France, again, home favorites. Australia, who've got a new lineup this time around, not their sort of top four from years gone by. And the USA, who are clear favorites to win this heat. I think they're going to win this heat in a dominant way. And I think it's going to be a close race between Australia and France to get the second spot there.
Won't argue with you on that one.
Easy claps there. And I'm not writing the Swiss off because they took my lunch money at late qualifiers.
Yeah, no, you better be careful.
Yeah, I could just imagine there's a Swiss rower there's in a good position to give me shit. But if I'm going off paper, I think these USA is definitely going to go through, and then I'd say Australia and France have got a good chance of going through. Switzerland have shown. You know what? Actually, no. Switzerland, I think I've got a chance of going through there. They've had some good races against that French crew. So, but I do think I'd give it to France and Australia. But shout out to my boys, the Swiss. I'm not hating at all in any way. Anyway, James, moving on to the quads. In the women's quad, we have an interesting scenario where China, who were Olympic champions 3 years ago and a very dominant crew, are not so dominant anymore. I think the two big names on this roster are the British, who are world champions, and the Dutch, but they certainly are not in a field of their own. I think heat one looks quite spicy. You have the Dutch, China, Romania, Australia, Ukraine. And I think in this situation, we know about the Dutch having a really good quad. China, Olympic champions. Romania have got that X factor. They did well at Europeans, and Ukraine won the first World Cup. They went through late qualifiers. They have a London gold medalist in that crew, by the way. So I think Heat 1 of the women's quad, the Dutch and Ukraine going through. Olympic champions going through the rep.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that's a big call on the Chinese not to go through, but it's hard to bet against that Ukrainian combination. They look really good.
Definitely. And then in the second heat, not as spicy, USA, Switzerland, Germany, and GB. In this case, I think it's going to be GB going through without any real difficulty. And then out of USA, Switzerland, Germany, I think it's going to be quite close. But in fact, I'd give it to the Germans, who have been taken quite a big step up this season. And they've got probably the biggest pedigree in the women's quad. They have so many medals in this event. So I think GB Germany going through. James agrees with me, nodding in approval.
Well, I'm not Lawrence. I'm just going to agree.
Yeah, I need Lawrence. Lawrence actually.
Lawrence gonna go back and say some crazy stuff.
Next time we do this, we're definitely getting three people on. Yeah, just to make it spicy. Men's quad. Here's where things can get quite spicy. We've spoken a lot about them in the crew chat of the rivalry between the Polish and the Italians. You have the Dutch, who are one of the most dominant crews at this event. They're in Heat 1. They're getting through. There's no doubt about that. I think GB are probably the next favorites to go through, but I think you got to keep your eyes out for Norway, who's going to be in
Yeah,
lane 1,
100%. That
and
Norway crew is
Norway
really
crew.
good.
Yeah, I think that Norway crew is really good. You even earmarked them, in fact, in our notes. Norwegian crews, dark horses to get through, and I think Romanians as well. It's tough. It's hard to sort of again start making too many predictions on a boat that hasn't rowed too much. They've only raced Europeans, so I don't know. I don't know if the Romanians will be able to get through, but I think the British and the Dutch, I mean, the British and the Norwegians are going to have I think, a good tussle to get through that last spot.
I think we can pretty much say the same thing for that crew as with every other one. The Romanian crew is an outside shot at a medal, and we actually don't know enough about them to really say what's going to happen.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's actually hard to call. So, who are you picking there? Please don't tell me you're picking anyone else besides the Netherlands.
Yeah, the Netherlands are going to go through. I think that's one of my most confident guesses, and I think it's hard to write off the British in that case as well.
Yeah, British and the Netherlands, safe options. Second heats, I think it's quite straightforward. You have Italy and Poland going against each other in another cap of their rivalry. This will be the 9th time in this Olympic cycle they've raced each other.
That is a stat.
That is a stat. And at the moment, Poland leads with 5 victories over 3 victories for the Italians. However, I think on form, the Italians are probably slightly better. And they have Luca Rambaldi, who's come into the Italian quad. They've got a lot to settle. We spoke about it in the crew chat. They caught a crab in the Olympic final in Tokyo and really took them out the race. Luca's sort of gone through a scenic route, racing the double. Now he's back in the quad. I think he's going to have a big impact on the men's quad. So I think Italy are going through this top 1. Poland very close second. I think Estonia and Switzerland are going to find the racing a bit hot in this heat.
It is amazing at this late stage that Rambaldi finds himself in the quad.
It's Italy. I mean, I feel like we're talking Romania and Italy are on the same flipping WhatsApp group here.
Italian culture.
I mean, Romania, they
Don't
speak.
get attached to your crew.
Yeah, don't get attached to your crew. Romania's obviously taken a thing. But Anton Kilimaneci, the Romanian head coach, or I don't know if he's head coach of director of rowing, he's from Italy. So it's I'm not surprised that we see that. I did call that Switzerland have sort of a wild card chance of winning a medal, but in this heat, I think they're going to find the going a bit tough to get through Italy and Poland.
But I don't think. I mean, I don't think that in the long run, in these cases, going through the reps is going to be too detrimental for them, provided the weather holds up. And I think that in a lot of these cases, most of these crews, Jake, they're all outside shots at a medal.
Yeah.
And if we come up and some of the people that maybe we didn't speak about medal, no one's going to be that surprised because that's just the way rowing goes.
Yeah, definitely. And in the Swiss, I mean, I pulled up their sort of like on their cheat sheet here. They've made a big step up this season. They actually have beaten Poland at Europeans. They came second at Europeans, which I think is a massive result for them. But I think it's hard to look too much into that Europeans result with the rough weather. They did have a very good lane, but you can't take that away from them. Most recently, they finished second at the third World Cup, and they are going into this regatta with a PB of a 5:42. So they do have they're on really good form, but still, it's really hard to call. They've had one really good race. They've had one really good race at Europeans, but all other races they've been off the pace against the big dogs in terms of Italy, Poland, GB, and the Netherlands. So I do think in this, while they do have a good chance of medaling, well, not a good chance, they have a chance of medaling. I think they're going to be going through the rep this time around. Not too much to argue with there.
I think you put it really nicely.
Okay, moving on to the
Just
eights.
the eights.
The eights. Well, we have the singles as well, but I mean, I don't think there's too much we can look into there, especially since I've cocked up the draw. So the eights we have the women's eights: Canada, GB, Norway. That's not right. I think that's Denmark. Canada, GB, Denmark, and Australia. Romania, Italy, and the USA. Um, it's top one going through. So the first race you have Canada, GB, and Australia. Top one. Who's going to make it through there? I think on form you have Canadians as probably the favorites going through, but I think they haven't done historically as well this cycle as the British and Australians. So who do you think is gonna take it? Are you putting value on historic pedigree or
I think
recent form?
I mean, recently Canada are looking like their old gold medal winning selves. So they definitely should be, I would say, favorites to go through this heat. In terms of the British, they could so easily take it as well. Um, I think Australia might struggle in this one. It's also top one. You're going to have a full rep. You're only knocking out one person. I don't think that they're going to take this. They're going to use this more as a part of their training than
Who's
as
taking this as part of their training? These crews.
I'm saying. I don't see. I don't see I don't see anyone killing themselves to make it through this heat.
It's so hard to call though because like in the age you have to start so hard.
Yeah.
So like why don't you if you're Denmark and half a length down to the Canadians going through 700 meters, do you make a call there or do you say fuck guys, we have a chance here? Because again, what this race does is that it might not, you only have 3 races and it might not, it's not a disaster going through the rapid charge. But what this race does, it is a guarantee to not get eliminated. Because if you go through to the rep, you have a chance of getting eliminated on the spot.
Oh, sure. I mean, of course, you want to avoid the rep, but I think of all the races here, you're eliminating one crew. I can't see that if you're half a length down and the other crew's got the jump on you at the start. I don't think that anyone's going to lose too much sleep over it if you already have a couple of the other cruise numbers.
And then, James, the second heat's also quite spicy. Romania, who have been the world champions 2 years running, European champions. We've only seen them once, and they've loaded up their 8. And Italy, lane 2, who I think is going to find the going a little bit tough. USA women's 8, who are in lane 3. And I would say that Romania perhaps would have an easy way through it. However, the USA have definitely tapped into their legacy and their pedigree a little bit. They've loaded their 8s up, they cannibalized their 4 and their pair to make this 8 as fast as possible. They probably had a poor race in Lucerne. They finished third, maybe a little bit off the pace, but they're second last year at World Champs, and they've loaded their crew up. So I think this is going to be a really big race between the USA and Romania. Out of the two of them, I would still give Romania the benefit of the doubt, but it's going to be a really close race. They haven't raced Romania yet this cycle, so it's going to be a debut race in the heat. So yeah, it's going to be really tough. Who do you think's got the edge there?
Look, Romania absolutely have the edge, if we can say that. I don't think that this crew has too many chinks in their armor, especially if they've got Simona Radis coming through for them.
Does one person make such a big difference?
I think that it does, because it's not just about the pure watts, it's also about the culture in the build-up, someone who really knows what they're doing. And they've obviously made the call for her to go into the 8. That's a big call. One other thing is I wouldn't write off that Italian crew so easily.
No.
They have had a good season this year. I think they've had a couple of medals. I think they've won one of the World Cups, if I'm not mistaken.
They're going to have their unbelievably like a race of the gods to get through this heat
But
against
this is a
Romania.
really tight heat, I think. And
It
I don't
is.
think they're going to be spat out the back.
Oh, I think I don't want to get stuck in the conversation in Italy because I don't want to.
If you're too emphatic,
Yeah,
you're gonna eat your words
I'm going
on
to eat my words.
Sunday.
But I want to sort of, if we go head to head here, I just want to go head to head on Romania and USA. On results, Romania last two they're world champs last 2 years in a row, three-time European champions. Um, that's it's a perfect record at the big events. They have a best time of 6:01, which is better than USA 6:03. So on paper, I think Romania are clear favorites going in here, but I think on form, the USA, there's just something about this USA crew that's giving me sort of gold medal vibes. You have some big names in there: Megan Muziki, Molly Brugman, Maddie Wanamaker, some big names and lots of experience. And of course, the USA have got that pedigree in the women's eight. So, and it's going to be an interesting race to see. Does USA have what it takes to beat Romania to take that spot straight through the heat?
Look, it's the same. It's the same old story. They absolutely have what it takes. Whether they will actually do it is different. They definitely can do it,
Yeah,
and I think it's the same case in a lot of these races.
definitely. Well, let's close the book there. I think we've said Romania, top one favorites. USA have good chance of going through. James, Italy could be in the mix there. Um, men's eight, James. Event that has a dominant crew, GB. They haven't quite sort of lost their magic. I know they've had a couple close calls, but I still think they're favorites in this event. They find themselves in Heat 2, racing Italy and Australia. So what's interesting here is that they have another chance to sort of quash the Australians' confidence. But bear in mind, Australians have got their top loaded eight. Recently, they met at Lucerne. GB swept the floor, but the Aussies have beaten them, so they know how to do it.
Yeah, I can't, as much as I would love to see that Australian crew come and really take it. I just don't know how they can beat that British eight.
I think they actually have a good shot here because I know they got smashed at Lucerne. They were way off the pace. However, they raced World Cup 3. They didn't race any of the big names, but they won World Cup 3. They put 7 seconds into that German 8. So I don't know. I think Australia here are sleeping giants. They've never won a men's
No
8.
question.
I think there's a lot to prove, and they've definitely taken a page out of New Zealand's book by sticking the three rows from their four. The Purnell, Hargreaves, and Turin are now racing the 8. So you saying one person can have such a big impact? What about three Olympic champions?
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, I'm leaving
Yeah.
James speechless on the four.
Yeah,
So
no, I
top
think you're
one,
100% right. They are an incredible crew. They can absolutely win this. There is no doubt that they can show up and put 2 seconds into everyone. No one will be surprised if that happens.
yeah.
But the earlier results didn't show that that was what was going to happen.
I think in this heat, Australia are going to have to go out really hard to have a shot at making it through. They're going to have to put the British under pressure early because I think if they give GB any sort of supremacy in the first K of this race, they're not going to be able to go through. But I think for the Australians, I think in the bigger picture, if they do what New Zealand did last Olympics and they have to go through the rep, I think it might be a good thing for them. So I say if they're going to try, going for the win, GB is going to take it, but I think Australia want to go through the repercharge in this situation in the men's eight to get more racing experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to go hammer and tongs at the British, and it doesn't mean they're going to lose if they lose the heat. I think another interesting side is the other end of the draw, the USA versus the
Oh
Dutch.
yes, and Romania, James, Romania. How can
Romania
you?
have loaded their eight. That's
Romania
true.
loaded their eights. They are European champions. I don't want to speak out of turn here, and we do have Germany in this heat, but I
No, I
think
think the British are European champions.
the British European champions. But yes, the Romanians and the USA are going to have a big race. I think USA definitely on paper they are they've come a long way since their sixth place finish at World Champs last year. They had a fantastic race at Lucerne. They almost beat the British. I think they are definitely on form to be strong contenders for that gold medal. If there's a crew that can beat the British for that gold, it's definitely the USA. So we'll see. And the Romanian crew, it's so, again, James, it's so hard to sort of talk too much about the Romanian eight because they have such a new lineup, and it's a it's such a big rotation of rowers in a team. So it's really hard to look into it. But they do have some big names there: Florin Lahaci, Marius Kosmiec, Sergiu Bejan. Those names jump out at me of racing in Olympic medalist crews from the past. But again, it's going to be interesting to see how they go up here.
Look, I think with the eight, we've got to get through that heat and that repechage. And I think that the final is going to be nuts. There's about 4 or 5 crews, I think, that could take that gold medal on their day.
Yeah, no,
Because
that is.
we're sleeping on the Netherlands, who have been right up there this whole cycle.
Yeah, I
And it's hard to, looking at the quality, it's hard to even think that they could win.
no, I think the Netherlands are going to get a silver medal at this Olympic Games. I said it in the crew chat. I think they've finished second so many times. I haven't, I hate saying this because these athletes got to listen to this episode and want to kill me.
I don't think they're listening to this
No, they're
episode,
probably
Jake.
not. They're probably not listening to this episode, but they've finished second so many times. Do they? I don't know if they possess the killer instinct to go for that gold medal. I think they're going to go through the repechage, and then they go get into the final. They're going to win a silver medal. I think USA are going to come out top one in this heat. I think Romania are going to come out super hot, but they're going to struggle in the third quarter against the Dutch and the USA. But Romania are also going to make it through the rep and have a good tussle for medals in the final.
So who's your gold medal?
Uh, I want to say something dumb, but I'm going to be safe here. I'm going to say GB gold. I don't even know
What do you want to say?
I want to say USA gold. I'm going to say GB gold for sure. Netherlands silver, USA bronze, which I think is the same one I gave in the crew predictions.
I mean, if you just look at those 7 crews, 5 of them can definitely, if they rock up on their day, they can win that gold medal.
The only two
Netherlands,
crews,
Romania, USA, Australia, and GB. And it's only because Germany seems to have not had the best time since Europeans, where they looked like they were also pretty strong.
yeah, I think Germany and Italy are definitely the two crews that have not shown the speeds of these other crews, which is actually crazy that we're putting Germany in this conversation. Who's getting
Yeah.
knocked out?
I think Italy's not going to make it. I hate to say.
Yeah. Did you watch their race at late qualifiers where they beat Canada by like they took over a length in the last 500 meters to beat Canada to qualify for this Olympics?
No, I mean, they a brilliant crew, but I just don't see them being able to take the Germans.
Well, hopefully the Italians are listening to this episode and James just gives them the fire that they need to get through. Anyway, let's finish it up by talking about the single sculls. In this conversation, I think there are later episodes, James, we're going to talk about them more. It's really hard to sort of look too much into the heats. Nothing too interesting. I think it's going to be a matter of sort of eliminating the smaller fish till you get all the big names racing in perhaps the semifinals, maybe the quarterfinals. But again, what's interesting, while many events have a straight route straight to the final, the single scullers have a long way to go. They have at the beginning of their journey, the top 3 qualify to the quarterfinals, ladies and gentlemen.
Quarters, reps, semis.
Yeah, so
Final.
there are lots of athletes here that are going to be going through the reps just to get into the quarterfinals and then try and get through the semi and the final.
Yeah.
So what we're really going to find here is that the big names in the women's single, the Caroline Florine, Emma Twigg, and Tara Rigney, I think are going to be cruising all the way through. The only time they're going to have some tough races is against each other in the final. I think some of the other sort of really experienced countries like Bulgaria, Serbia, Switzerland, Germany, they are going to perhaps have some close racing in the quarterfinals and the semifinals. Big shout out to our South African sculler, Paige Badenhorst, racing in Heat 1. She's going to be first up for the women's single sculls. She needs to beat Spain, Iran, Australia, Nicaragua, and Uganda to get through. and I believe she can do it. I think they got their names down. I think Australia and Spain will perhaps be a little bit faster, but I think she's got a good chance of taking Iran, definitely beating Uganda and Nicaragua.
I hope so. I'm sure that she definitely can do it.
I don't know if it is Nicaragua. I'm just putting a disclaimer out there. When I did this draw, I literally looked at the video that someone sent me live of the draw as it happened to write it down in time for the episode. So I was staring at tiny country codes and flags. And most flags I pride myself on knowing, but a lot of the countries that have got blue, the blue is the same tone. So it's really difficult to tell. So Nicaragua could be someone else, but it's maybe Nicaragua. I don't know. I think I'm wrong because I've never heard of Nicaragua rowing in my life.
I'm not touching that one, Jake.
There are also a couple question marks in this draw, so it's hard to talk. In the men's single, again, I mean it's the same sort of conversation. Germany Germany's racing. Ollie's in lane 5. He's up against Libya, Zimbabwe, Cuba, and question mark. I don't know who the last one is. So again, not too much to look into in the heats, except for like the big nations. Just I think it's just about them getting through and saving their energy for the big races. Anything to add there, James?
No, I think semi-finals are going to be wild, and you're going to see heartbreak there. But until then, I don't think you're going to see too much to trouble the big names here.
So, James, I think that we've gone through the events, and it brings us to the end of the discussion. Thanks for coming on the show. I think that's a big wrap. I think are there any other big questions we've missed of the Olympic hype train?
No, I think we've covered it quite well. I'm just so excited that the Olympics are here.
Yeah, I know. Me too. It's really super exciting. Heat start on Saturday, ladies and gentlemen. So don't miss out. Racing's going to be happening every single day going forward. I think the first final is going to be happening on Wednesday. So Wednesday, yeah. First finals are happening on Wednesday.
Quads are early.
Quads are early. So stay tuned. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. It's a new thing we're trying out. We're definitely refining it this time around. We don't have a set studio, so we set up shop in my house. Lawrence is off to France soon, so James Britton joined me after work. And shout out to our Patreons out there, all our listeners. If you're interested in supporting the show, you can go find find Derosha on Patreon. But besides that, follow us on social media. Word of mouth, James. Tell me, how does word of mouth fit in with the marketing these days?
How does word of mouth fit in?
Is it still as effective as social media and stuff? I feel like word of mouth is the king.
Well, I think it's refer your friend to us. I think one of the biggest things is that we've got the fantasy league going to be running this week for our Patreons. So come and have a look at that side. We're really excited to get going and finish off the season. There's $200 up for grabs.
Yes, and keep your eyes peeled. We're also going to have medalist predictions for the wider public. So there's a lot happening on the Row Show. But besides that, guys, James, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
If you like James, well, you're in luck. We're going to be hearing much more of him with the coverage over the Olympics. So if you don't like him, tough shit. But thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen. We're out, and enjoy the Olympic Games.
Thanks, everyone.